I'd like to talk about the future, your future and my future. And the reason for it is because, to quote Yogi Berra, the philosopher, baseball great, he said, the future ain't what it used to be. And what he was talking about is when FDR signed the first, the predecessor to our current Social Security Act, the expectation was that the average man at that time would work for the same company for about 40 years. And at the end of that time, after receiving a gold watch at his retirement party, he'd go home, sit on the couch, and his dutiful wife would take care of him for the next 5 years, because the actuarial table said that that's pretty much how long he'd live. And it was men at that time primarily. And for years that proved to be true, that's pretty much what happened. Well, Yogi again, the future ain't what it used to be. There have been changes that have already become obvious to all of us. Any of us who have reached the age of 65, the typical age of retirement, give or take 10 years one side or the other, know that this is the case. First of all, retirement parties and gold watches are a thing of the past. Companies don't want people hanging around for 40 years anymore. And when a person goes home to work, the dutiful wife is not there because she has a career of her own. And so now, instead of waiting for the preacher to pronounce after 5 years that he has gone on to his final reward, all of a sudden now there's a major change that's taken place. And folks, this is what I want to talk to you about. The biggest change that has taken place is in longevity. They have been doing studies at Stanford for the past number of years now. I heard Laura Carstensen, who heads that study up, speak about 20 years ago in Palo Alto, California. And she talked about it at that time, and in her book, A Long Bright Future, she said, brace yourself, that on average, a person who reaches the age of 65 has another 25 or 30 years of life expectancy, and that is a lot of time to play pickleball. Pickleball, golf, fishing, all of those activities, bridge, things that we envision we would use our time for are not enough now. Not that they're bad in themselves. In fact, as you know, golf is a fun thing to do. Those of you that play bridge know that's interesting to do. I haven't played pickleball, but I've talked to people that have, and they're very satisfied with it. A lot of people like to take up fishing. I had one fellow tell me that he goes, since he retired, goes fishing in a well in his backyard. And I asked him, do you catch anything? He says, no, but it's really convenient. And so, but on a more serious note, you may recall that Thoreau said that men spend their lives fishing without realizing that's not fish that they're after. So what they are after is what this talk is about. See, the research and work that Martin Seligman has done at the University of Pennsylvania revolves around this whole issue. They're calling it well-being. I call it a life well lived. And I base that on the experience I had when I went to the memorial service for my mentor, who had an unfortunate accident at the age of 90, fell and ended up dying. And he his life was characterized as a life well lived. And I'll just tell you, it was. It was a full, rich, exciting life. He spent all of his working years in the Dale Carnegie business, helping other people to grow. A member of his church, Rotary Club president, community leader, all of those things. So he had a life well lived, and it got me thinking about what does it take for us to live our lives beyond the satisfaction that comes from pickleball or golf or fishing or whatever. And I like the work that Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania has done on this subject, because what it says to me is there really is a way for us to lead full, rich, satisfying lives. Now I know this from personal experience, because in the early 70s, I pulled up roots and took my wife and 2 little daughters, and we moved to Spain, lived there for a couple of years, doing what I later characterized as Byron's folly, because I managed to go dead broke, came back to the United States. I had contacted my best friend Bob James, who lived in New York at the time, and he said, come and stay with us for a couple of days. So we stopped, and after a nice meal, a good night's sleep, we sat and were visiting, and he said, well, what's new with you, Byron? I said, well, Bob, not a lot is new. I'm dead broke. I don't have a job. The country has been in a recession for the last several years, so my resume isn't going to look very good when I go out to get a job. And he smiled and looked at me, and he said, I see. He said, what business are you in? And I really got angry. I said, Bob, I don't have a business. I don't have a job. I don't have any money. I don't even know how I'm going to get my family back to California. He said, I'm not worried about you. He said, you'll be all right. He said, but I mean, what business are you in as a man? Well, I didn't have an answer, so I changed the subject. The next day I borrowed some money from Bob, and we got back to California. My wife and I got temporary jobs and temporary place to live until we got on our feet. And all I could think about was that question, what business am I in? One day I got it, picked up the phone, called him, and I said, Bob, I've got the answer to your question. He said, what was the question? I said, the business question thingy. He said, oh yeah, what'd you come up with? I said, I'm in the business of helping other people grow. That's what I do, whether I'm on my feet teaching a class, giving a talk, sitting down with a friend, or anything else that will help them. He said, how do you mean? I said, let me give you an example. I said, a couple of months ago, when we were living in Barcelona, I managed to get tickets to a classical guitar competition. So we went. It was down in the old Barrio Gótico, the Gothic section of Barcelona. And it was in this ornate old music hall, Musica. And there were a couple hundred people there. The judges were seated in the front. And these Catalonians were all dressed in their finery. And the contestants all came out. And they were all the same, the first 4. Young men, slicked back, black hair, tuxedos, very expensive looking inlaid guitars. And they sat down and they played what I thought, to my untrained ear, was really good classical guitar. And this very proper Catalonian audience at the finish applauded as though they were like at a golf event. But the 5th contestant came out, very, very different. First of all, she was a woman. She had this long granny-type gown on. Her hair was done up in a neo-hippie style. And she had a classical guitar, too. It looked as though it was older, but well taken care of. And she smiled at the judges, smiled at the audience, and sat down and started to play. And Lord, what playing. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I didn't know anything about music, but I knew that that was cut above anything we'd heard. When she finished, the audience came to their feet as though they were at a rock concert and started applauding and cheering for her. Well, it didn't take the judges very long after she went off stage to deliberate. She won the first prize and the money. And then Patricia, my wife, and I were walking back to the barrio where we were staying, back to the pension in the barrio. And I said, honey, I have an idea of what these contestants are doing. I said, I think these young men probably are going home, sitting down with their families, loosening their ties, having a glass of wine, and talking about what they'll do differently next year. Different selection, different order of playing. But I see something very different for her. I see her coming back by herself to a pension, maybe here in the barrio Gothic section. And she sits down, lets her hair down, looks at the check and the certificate and throws it on the bureau, pours herself a glass of sherry, and picks up her guitar and starts to play. I said, Bob, she wasn't playing for that check. She wasn't playing for that certificate. She wasn't playing for our applause. She was playing because that's who she is. And that's what I want for my life. I want to teach and work with people and help them grow because that's who I am. Well, the rest of the story, it's kind of easy from there on. I went on to get back into the Dale Carnegie business, which I'd been in before I left, and had a wonderful, satisfying career. Harriet, you can relate to the satisfaction I got from teaching and that I still get from doing programs like this. So what I want for you is to find that one thing that lights your fire, that excites you, that helps you to become all you're capable of becoming. But more than that, I want you to do something with it. Let me tell you a quick story. About 3 years ago, I was visiting a friend in Barcelona, Wally Vega. Wally and I had been colleagues in the Dale Carnegie business, and now, age 65, he had gone on to continue to be in the training business. And as we talked a little bit, I said, Wally, why are you doing this? I said, you're 65, you've made the money you need, why don't you retire? Very excitable, enthusiastic guy. Got him, slammed his head on the table. He said, share what you've learned. I said, what? He said, share what you've learned. You've spent a lifetime acquiring the knowledge and skills and wisdom that you have. To take that with you would be a shame. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought, that's really true. We've got a generation following us, and we have a responsibility, an opportunity, and an obligation towards those people to help them become all that they can become. So I would encourage you to do that. Become all you can become, and then help others to become all they can become. And I'll close with a thought from the poet Mary Oliver, who said in her poem, A Summer's Day, tell me, what do you plan to do with this one wild and exciting life that you have?